very honored Frater BT's Esoterinnerd podcast, episode 103, in which Robby Strong, aka Silence the Aquarian, and I, aka Pymander Aquarian, interview Barry Taylor. Barry's journey in life has covered things like having been a roadie for ACDC, as well as an Episcopal Rector, I should say, and being Robby's professor at Fuller University. Small correction there, it's Fuller Seminary, not university. In this episode, we will discuss many things. Not a whole lot esoteric, really, but a bit of the kind of spiritual leaning and, it's sort of existential, philosophical, and political and current events. So I hope that people who are Esoterinerd purists won't be too disappointed by that. It's a good conversation. I recommend it. And if you're tuning in on YouTube and you stay through to the end, now don't skip to the end. That'd be cheating. But if you listen all the way through, there's actually one or two surprises just for you guys. If you're listening to this on a podcasting platform or from the audio file, check out our YouTube channel. You can just go to YouTube and search Esoterinerd, and it'll say, "Do you mean esoteric?" And you say, "No, I mean Esoterinerd," and then hit subscribe, and that'd be great. But before we get to all that, as per Esoterinerd podcast tradition, we will have one of our segments. I think today we'll revisit a bit of the old Transformations and Footnotes. For those of you who are new to the Esoterinerd podcast, the Transformations and Footnotes segment is the segment in which I recite my father's book, verse by verse. It's divided into chapters and verses, like the Bible. And the footnotes, I used to have commentary about, I'd talk about what he said, but I stopped doing that. But it's still called Transformations and Footnotes. This is Transformations. Actually, first, this is Tangerine Dream. This is Transformations by John Dan Reeb, 1976. Chapter 5, verse 1. Up in the same water system as Sespe Hot Springs, up in Ventura County, there is this place where a creek gets deep, flowing over and by a big rock that you and I both know. Verse 2. You and I remember a time when we watched a bunch of journeyers and flesh place fear junkies skinny dipping there. We were too. Verse 3. Anyhow, one of the flesh place fear junkies, a guy who was all pinwheel-eyed and belief-stuck about being flaked on acid and making those who weren't wrong, swam and dove and swam and slammed right into the rock. He got a 5-point concussion. That's what we call slamming into an agreement. Verse 4. The thing is, we all agreed that the rock was and is there. We all put it there as part of the game board. We even all agreed, including him, that he would have and exercise the option to swim and dive and swim and slam into it. Verse 5. That's the thing about the flesh place and several other levels and places, in slightly different ways, usually, though not always exactly. Significance is now optional, and agreements, at least the solid ones we agreed to call permanent, relatively so still, are not always optional. Verse 6. Drugs get flesh place fear junkies and journeyers confused about agreements, like gravity, and what happens on this level when you jump unaugmented by parachutes or something off tall buildings and buses hurting when they hit you and stuff like that. Verse 7. That's on this level. What's so on other levels is terribly so there as well. It works to keep the agreements straight. It does not work to get them confused. It works to remember which level or levels you're operating on. It does not work to forget. Yes, of course, you and I both know that it is possible to operate on more than one level at once. Possible, hell, we do it all the time. It's just that we're focused on one or the other specifically, more than the others we're on at any given point. Verse 8. The theoretical physicists are just finding out, or so they think. Some of them may even be realizing that they are remembering. That's when it really gets to be fun, unless they think it's a soap opera. In the flesh place, even boo-hoos way underneath are fun. Verse 9. Now some literal-minded flesh place fear junkies are going to think that you and I condone doing negative things because way underneath it's all fun. Not so. First, what goes around comes around. Second, it's Kali Yuga o'clock. Now I think we'll have some footnotes this time. Yeah, that part. I mean, okay, I read this book after he died. I had just turned 16. I think after maybe a month or two, when you're that age and going through something like that, time goes much more slowly. So it seemed like a long time, but I got his book, Transformations. There was only ever 3 physical copies, as far as I know. Maybe there were a few others that he gave away, but I don't know about them. So this book had an effect on me. It was the words of him having just passed beyond the veil. And his words of advice, I think when I think back on when I was 16 and 17 and 18, I definitely didn't dive in. Some of my friends were kind of getting into the rave scene, and I was always hesitant to get too far into any of that. But I did eventually experiment with LSD and some other psychedelics. And so, yeah, I definitely have a different approach toward my life path than the one that my dad had, or the one that he seemed to be recommending in his book. But I feel like it's not for me to poo-poo what he's saying. Part of me just kind of wants to stand back and just let it stand on its own. But on the other hand, I don't want y'all to think that I'm just, proclaiming these words and then going on to the interview without kind of chiming in a little bit. And, I have to give credit where credit is due. If it weren't for DMT, I don't know if I would be living in India right now. That kind of reminds me of, if it weren't for my horse, I don't know if I would have spent that year in college. You remember from Lewis Black? Anyway. Yeah, enough about all that, and I think I've spoken about that on previous episodes. So without further ado, now normally we would bring in the co-host and then do without further ado, and then do Camille and Kennerly playing Game of Thrones, as the actual episode proper starts with the interviewee. Today is going to be a little bit different. I'll explain. Firstly, Game of Thrones in 2015, when I started this was it 2016 or 2015? Anyway, whenever I started this podcast, Game of Thrones was still widely considered to be the best thing ever made for any kind of screen. At that time, that was how it was looked at. And we all remember, we were all there. We all know what happened. So when I was making Esoterinerd, I opted to use that harp cover of Game of Thrones for the intro and outro to the episode because it was so cool. But sadly, it is not cool anymore. So everybody, you can check out Camille and Kennerly on YouTube. Find out who they are. I've been using their music for years. If you're a fan of this podcast, then do yourself a favor and check out their channel. And if there is a cover of something, I was looking for like The Expanse or something pretty cool, but what I went with for now was Lord of the Rings. So we're going to have a little bit of them playing the harp as usual, but it's not Game of Thrones, it's Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings is cool. I mean, maybe not every aspect of every movie in that series, and certainly not the Hobbit movies, but Fellowship of the Ring, Okay, so the other thing is we were having some technical difficulties because we had Robby up in Alaska with not the greatest internet connection, and we had the interviewee in the UK. There was some confusion about what time we were supposed to do it, and so it's a little bit jumbled in the beginning. So there isn't actually a clear-cut point where the interviewee comes in before the co-host comes back, and so everything's a big jumbled mess. So rather than bring in Robby and then eventually say, without further ado, let's get to that interview, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and say, without further ado, let's get to that co-host introduction and then the interview, shall we? Greetings, Frater. Can you hear me?
Are you recording?
Yeah. We're in the part of the episode where I introduced my co-host.
Okay, you might have to edit some of this out then.
Oh yeah, no problem. How you doing?
I haven't contacted. I'm doing pretty good. Just kind of a frustrating morning, and it's cold and rainy. And when it's raining at 40 degrees, it's a lot colder than when it's snowing at 20 degrees.
Raining at 40, colder than snowing. Oh, because of the water.
Yeah. Because snow is, it's nice.
I imagine
and
there's some
fluffy.
wind involved.
All right, let me try to send this to. After I do this, I'm going to go up to the wood shop where it's a little warmer, and I'm going to see if I can get connection there. If not, I'm just going to grab an extra layer and do it on the porch here.
Nice. You saw the Aurora Borealis.
Oh my goodness.
That's wild.
Let me get settled and I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to run up to the wood shop here.
A few minutes later.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Robby is doing something. He's going to the wood shed or something where he'll have better connection. We're just doing just for the sake of bandwidth. We're
audio.
doing only, but I feel like I should. Yeah. So this is what I look like. Hi.
How are you? And where are you?
I'm in Goa, India.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And how long do you live there? Are you stuck there? Or
No. I moved here. Well, first I was traveling. I ended up here in 2018. I met a beautiful woman, and now I'm living here and married. And but prior to that, I was a yoga instructor, and prior to that, I was an office drone at in the Screen Actors Guild. So I spent 10 years kind of observing the entertainment industry and all of its, but I had that job I got accidentally. I never intended to work in the entertainment industry in any capacity. So that, someone offered me a job and it paid better than other jobs I could get at the time. So, but then, after 10 years of that, I got sick of it and decided to start shaping my own destiny rather than just letting life happen to me. And I thought that yoga and meditation would be a good place to start.
great. And do you like it?
Yeah, I do. We've built our nest here. You can see my obligatory YouTuber bookshelf behind me. I shipped everything over here, and it's, India as a whole, there's a lot going on from place to place. Goa specifically is it's culturally very welcoming, and it's very Catholic. It's sort of like Brazil that way. It's like a little,
a lot of Portuguese people, right?
Yeah. And it just, they were Portuguese even through the Indian independence and all this probably. And so it's the local people are very friendly, and it's already diverse. It's diverse in itself, and then there's all the foreigners, and so it's very diverse, and depending on the neighborhood. And so I'm in one of the neighborhoods where there's more foreigners, but these days, of course, there's fewer. Most of the ones that are here are stuck here, or they live here. They're in my same shoes, you know.
Oh, that's really cool.
So you're in UK?
Yeah, I live in London now. I lived in Los Angeles for 34 years, but I moved back here three years ago.
Nice.
So although I live in London, I'm not from London. I grew up in the countryside near Cambridge. Okay. But I had ties to London, so it felt like a place to come to kind of rejigger my life. I haven't quite worked that out.
Yeah, like taking control of it, kind of. Sometimes it helps
it was just time for things to change. So
yeah, growing up in LA, I was in LA from the time I was born until a few years ago, and I felt like, you know, when you leave potatoes in the pantry and you forget about them for a few months, I felt like that very much. Like I just had too many roots. Oh, he's writing to me. Let me see. So yeah, it was really nice. Oh, okay, he's trying to get in. Let me see what I can do here. Send an invite. So I'm going to switch back to audio only because the recording will be better.
Yeah, no worries. How long have you been doing a podcast?
Well, I first started this podcast in 2015, and you know how things change and evolve. Life changes and evolves. So that was 6 years ago. Gosh. Originally, it was sort of focused on Golden Dawn specific Hermeticism, Kabbalah, that kind of thing, but then started bringing in other elements. I have a personal interest in Buddhism, especially Vajrayana, and Zen, and so yeah, so it became sort of eclectic, but always kind of, you know, hovering around the general center of Golden Dawn. You're familiar with the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn of London, 1800s? Yeah. So that kind of thing. I was in a reenactment of that when I was a kid. I mean, you know, from the time I was a teenager until a few years ago, and that was one reason I left, you know, LA behind and got as far away as possible. I left the cult, you know. So so that was around the time I started the podcast, was part of my recovery, and as a place where other people can kind of come on. And at the time, there were a few people that were sort of afraid to talk, or they thought that someone was going to come after them if they admitted that they you know, went through weird things. And so that was kind of the main purpose of it in the beginning. And of course, in the years since then, the podcast has gone all kinds of different directions. And so, you know, now it's, I just told Robby, you know, you're my co-host, whoever you think would be a good guest, you know, invite them. So
and Rob's in Alaska now, right?
Yeah, he's having a wild time, and still working because he's working from home.
Oh, is that right? I wondered about that.
He's putting in 40 hours a week in the jungle, well, in the tundra.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Now, where is that guy? He's having a rough time. I think his internet connection isn't so good where he's at.
Maybe, yeah, must be, I guess.
So I understand you used to have a connection with ACDC?
Many years ago, yeah. My sort of early meanderings in life were in the music business. So I was a sort of, you know, roadie, sound engineer person for a long time, and I worked for ACDC for, you know, a few years.
Which years?
From like the late 70s into the start of the 80s. So,
wow, what a time.
Sort of golden years for them.
Yeah, gosh.
But, yeah, sort of lifetime ago, you know, different life. One of those things that you do and then move on from, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was a good way to, it was a great way to be able to go out and see the world, actually, is really what it was mostly great for.
Yeah,
I mean,
better than joining the
I-
army or something.
exactly. But also, quite a lot of fun. But wasn't something. I mean, I really got involved in the music business because I like to travel, and it was a great way to get paid and travel, and then have money to do your own traveling afterwards. So that was kind of the real. I mean, I've always been involved in music in one form or another.
Mm.
So that was a great way to kind of get out of a small country place in England.
Yeah, wow. How long was it between those years and the Rector years?
Well, it was a sort of, it was a bit of a crossover. I mean, there were part of getting out of the music business was connected to kind of wanting to explore other aspects of life, and I'd always kind of been interested in philosophy and stuff like that, less so religion actually. And the religion thing was, I can't say it was a surprise, because obviously it was a decision that I made, but it wasn't. I was never and have never been on a search for God.
Right.
So the religious thing was, I don't know if it came as a surprise, but I think I was surprised that I was as interested as I was in what was happening inside religion. But I also think that, with a few more years to think about it, that really I've always been interested in the kind of sociological and cultural aspects of religion as well.
Yeah.
What it represents beyond just the practice of a particular form of faith, but connected to sort of the search for ultimacy or transcendence, or the search for meaning, and the myriad ways that people take for in life, and how culturally and socially shaped those things are. And I was very interested in the kind of impact of societal change on religious belief itself in general. The way
Yeah.
people,
At least in the Episcopal Church.
yeah, and I was, I mean, the Episcopal Church was a small piece of a larger involvement in various forms of Christianity that were in some ways dogmatically or theologically or doctrinally similar, but expressing themselves in different ways. So part of it was kind of almost anthropological.
Yeah.
Then the other part is just really, I don't know, you spend an awful lot of your life digging into something, and it still feels that there are things to be looked at. I mean, my relationship to many things religious has changed quite dramatically over the last number of years, just in terms of how I think about things and what I think about things, and what I think about how I used to think about things, and all of those kind of those changing things. So it's still kind of a bit of a work in progress, and I'm still not necessarily trying. In fact, I'm probably more adamantly not trying to find God on any level particularly. I just think that it's a kind of work in progress, kind of interesting idea to play around, and it still holds currency in the world in one form or another, even in the West, which, especially Europe, which tends to regard itself as kind of post-religious, which it really isn't. But
Right.
Yeah, so, and that sort of I sort of realized, probably, well, you look back at your life and you see things a lot more clearly than you did at the time. But I was, even before I got involved in the music business, I was always interested in philosophy and ideas about what it means to be human. And that's really my real interest, is the opportunities and the challenges of being human, and the role that things like religion particularly plays in the plays in that dynamic, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the various ways that people go after that, and what they might be looking for when they're looking for religion, which I don't think is always. I sometimes think we're chasing things and we don't know what we're chasing, you know. And religion, we think we're chasing religion, but we're chasing something else inside of us that religion, we think, might, you know, fill that hole, if it's a hole, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. So it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm waffling a little bit, but
no, yeah. In a way, the ACDC concert and the the church both kind of have their roots in that ancient Greek Dionysian ecclesia.
You know, there are lots of I mean, the way religions emerge and the way they develop and how they develop, I think is sort of, it's kind of fascinating, you know. And
did you have like a grandparent that took you to church as a kid, or?
I did have a well, I mean, very, very sporadically. I did have one my paternal grandmother was a bit of a church goer. She was a Methodist because she didn't like
Is that the rector?
Hey,
He made it.
Hey, rector. I'm so glad to walk in on a conversation between Frater BT and Professor BT.
how are you, Rob?
I'm quite a cold, but it's lovely. I'm looking at this Alaskan lake. There's normally snow-capped mountains I could see just on the other side of that. In order to stay connected, I'm having to I'm kind of working as a sort of a personal assistant for a woman for 3 weeks who's moving, selling her cabin, and it gave me a magnificent chance to see the Tongass wilderness.
Wow. Oh, that's what you're doing up there.
That is being logged at an alarming rate, I might add. I've seen some of the clear-cut forests, and it's pretty gruesome.
Wow, that's amazing. It looks pretty beautiful on your Instagram.
Oh, it is. It's the most magical place I've ever been. I will live here someday as my soul lives. So what have I missed on the discourse so far, fellas?
We just got to know each other a little bit, at first with the cameras and then without. And then, I told him how I ended up in Goa and what the podcast used to be about and kind of what it's about now, which is sort of not really clearly defined.
That's always a good thing, actually.
Yeah, I think so. It's just a catchy title at this point.
Yeah.
The reason I've been dying to talk to you, Barry Taylor, very honored Ed, is I was a teaching assistant in grad school for all the classes that were related to postmodernism, and a frequent topic of conversation was the idea of an epistemological crisis, and where there was a philosopher who wrote a book called "Whose Truth and Whose Rationality," kind of implying this coming crisis of incommensurability of discourse, where people would be speaking completely different languages and working with completely different data sets. And never did I imagine back then, when I was his teaching assistant, that the epistemological crisis would end up with like a kind of a cold civil war in America, with one side literally fomenting an armed insurrection and trying to kill Congress people. And Barry, what are your thoughts on the whole postmodern thing about epistemology and where we've landed?
Well, I mean, I think that the whole, I mean, I think it's a very complex scenario, because as with most things, there are so many factors that come into play. Because the whole, I mean, I in the last few years, my real sort of focus has been the impact of digitality on
Mhm.
religion and stuff like that, and the way in which you have these kind of echo chambers of
Podcasts.
ideological echo chambers
Mhm.
where your audience is essentially people of like mind who want affirmation of what they hold to be true, and the whole idea that it must be true because a certain group of people believe it's true.
Mm.
And for me, I'm not surprised that we've got here. I'm just surprised at maybe at the speed by which we got here, and the level
Yeah.
of animosity that drives the conversations now. The way in which you sense that those kind of truth claims are almost like well, I think in a very Freudian way, they're false objects of desire. It's not really about that at all. It's about deep-seated
Paging
frustration.
Dr. Zizek.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like a territorialism of reality itself.
yeah, and this whole back and forth, what's true and what's not true. I mean, for a start, I don't think you can confine truth to sort of propositions anyway. I think you can sort of encounter truth in lots of different ways, and it doesn't always have to be propositional. But
Interesting.
and I mean, I think you can find.
You do believe in scientific truth, though, right? Like the good old-fashioned dialectical materialism, the stuff you can measure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
Deserves some privileged position of truth because it's verifiable by the most amount of people.
I'm not defending the madness that gets portrayed as truth. I just think the argument about truth is often reduced to kind of propositional equations, and I think it's a bit more complicated than that, because I think you can discover truths. I think in some ways you can find truth in a story.
In a mustard seed.
Yeah, it's not factual, but it carries a truth. But the problem is we've got people that believe bullshit is true. I mean, there's this really interesting thing. I don't know if you saw this, but the woman who was Trump's lead lawyer in the election challenges, who's being sued for defamation, whatever it is, by that computing company, basically said yesterday that any rational person would know that she wasn't basically trying to state facts when she said all that stuff about the election. So she's sort of claiming
because she's such a liar that she can't be held to be telling the truth.
She's basically saying that anybody with common sense would have known that she wasn't telling the truth. But the fact of the matter is a whole bunch of people.
God.
Yeah, I mean, it's an insane argument, which really, I think, demonstrates the whole challenge.
So the boy who cried wolf is allowed to shout fire at a crowded theater, but nobody else is.
Exactly. You're supposed to know that there was a
Barry, one of the things that one of the strange recursions that I've kind of seen that I saw traces of in the discourses we had with some of the more conservative people at Fuller. You probably remember some of those spicy discourses, and at the time it seemed so innocuous.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that it would lead to fist fighting in the street? But there was this sort of thing that people that were kind of stuck at the concrete operational level of cognitive processing would come up against, and in regards to the ideal of relativism, and that really freaked them out. That truth could be relative, and they would often say, "Well, if truth is relative, then I could go kill your grandma. There'd be nothing wrong with it. How would you judge the basis of morality?" And it's almost like they were so baffled with postmodernism, postmodern ideas, that they sort of took it and said, "Okay, well, we're going to be postmodern then," but did it in a really shitty way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's almost performance art what these people have done. I mean, it's almost performance art, and that's that's the kind of language they use when they speak of this sort of my own truth, subjective truth or whatever.
And it's also very not, it's also very naive interpretations of things, because sort of the postmodern notion of relativity isn't the reduction of it's not the reduction of everything to a sort of level playing field. It's much more again, I hate to use the word again, but there is a sort of complexity and multiplicity in the whole idea of I think really that the charge that postmodernism is about relativism is a straw man. I actually think that postmodernism was really actually about paying close attention to detail and gaining a sense for the complexity and multiplicity and contradiction inherent in everything. You know what I mean? And sensitivity to difference. And I think the problem with the kind of conservative religious world is that it wants to colonize difference and make everything uniform. So any attendant difference is always, you have to eradicate it or colonize it, and usually they want to eradicate it, in defense of supposed capital T truth, and it gets very and again, I think that's I remember once, I think it might have been after you, Rob, but I realized that I sort of half knew it anyway, but I realized a lot of people weren't reading the literature that we were assigning. They were really just skimming the surface or reading the cover, and you started to see that what you got back from people was really the sort of consensual illusion about what postmodernism might have been, rather than actually a close reading of a particular person's text so that you would understand what they were actually saying. There was no digging into it. There was just reaction. Somebody said, oh, this means this. So, postmodernism is all about relativity and we stand for absolute truth. So therefore just attack it with all. I remember once, again, I don't know if you were there or not, but I was teaching this class on theology and culture, and I basically my
those were fun classes, man. Oh my goodness.
You were there, and I think there was this. I was talking about the fact that when we talk about things, we have to consider what we speak about after. So if you're going to talk about the human psyche, we speak about the human self after Freud. You don't have to agree or disagree with Freud, but you have to acknowledge that part of our understanding of the human self or the mind or stuff shifts dramatically when Freud and his peers come along and begin a new discussion about the nature of the self. And I said the same is true with like Darwin. We talk about origins of the world after Darwin, and that's a conversation changer. Again, you may not agree with the origin of the species or his particular theory of evolution. You might want to hold to a creation story or something like that, but you have to consider that we speak about these things after Darwin or something like that. And I remember this guy just went crazy, basically ranting about evolution and this and that and all the other. And I just stopped him and I said, well, have you ever read the origin of the species? And he went, no. And I asked the entire class, and there were about 80 people in the class, and not one person had actually ever read it. And I was like, well, until you've read it, you actually cannot say much about it.
That's actually a very kind and generous way to approach those kind of bellicose people, bury them in press.
Well, I mean, there's no.
I tend to cuss a lot more.
Yeah, well, I mean, I cuss, but I
It's
also
annoying
know,
when the Ayn Rand folks say it, but I like it when you say it.
Oh my God.
well,
You
I
can't
mean,
criticize it unless you've read all her books.
well, because and the reason I was saying that is because particularly within the lives of most of the students that I was engaging in, largely from sort of conservative or benignly something, evangelical Christian
Right.
environments, there's such an anti-evolutionary thread
Right.
that's informed by misinformation, because you just go back and nobody's ever read it. Now, I actually think that, having read On the Origin of the Species, because I believe that you should read, On Making
Yeah.
I mean, a horrible book,
Imagine that.
it's not like a fantastic book to read. So I understand why someone wouldn't read it. But if you haven't read it, shut the fuck up. Look, I don't know if we saw it.
That's fair. That's totally
No,
fair.
yeah, you can. It's an adult podcast.
And I'm not saying that you have to, know everything there is to know about a theory of evolution to talk about it. But in the context of a graduate school, where technically,
And how did the man respond when you
I
said
think
that, fairly fair
basically-
proposition?
basically got pissed off and went quiet.
I'd recommend Tellier Desjardins first, and then once they've gotten that, then move on to Origin of the Species.
Yeah, exactly. My point was, I think I said Origin of the Species because it was the 150th anniversary of Darwin, of that book, when I was teaching.
Right, I remember that.
And I had a special edition copy, so that's why I was talking about it. But so I think what happens a lot in our culture at the moment, and it's even more so now with social media and the various platforms, is that misinformation just builds upon misinformation. And the conspiracy theories just multiply, and it gets kind of crazy. I don't know if you've seen. Oh, go ahead.
You used a phrase earlier related to colonization of, was it like colonization of difference
of other
or
cultures.
what was the phrase you used?
Yeah, I think I think I said that people want to colonize difference, and in order
Colonize
to
difference.
in order to negate it or to diffuse its
Like how
threat.
the early church did with with Bridget and all these other pagan things. And these days you have the big corporations trying to look hip and indie, same basic idea. Or Constantine painting Jesus on all of his shields.
Yeah, I mean, there are always those ways in which we deal with what threatens us by attempting to subjugate it in some way or another. And I think for a lot of conservative Christians, I don't know, maybe I just shouldn't even use conservative. For a lot of
the
Christians,
evangelicals, like the American evangelical movement.
There's just a sense in which everybody is your enemy, again, because it's based on misinterpretations of things. So people, you have to, you see everything as a threat, and particularly if there's a counter thesis or an idea or a theory that threatens your take on what you've been told is the absolute truth of reality, which in and of itself is a joke, because we're all just stabbing in the dark, trying to give some shape to existence that we can live with, so we can hold it together. But
at best, it's a controlled fall.
I think you're right. And I think, and the invitation to sort of uncertainty and complexity and contradiction is very difficult for some people to come to terms with, you know, and in our time, it seems there's such a reduction of ideas down to these kind of manageable sound bites. So everybody trades in kind of sound bite versions of reality.
Yeah.
That all sounds good on paper.
Strawman. Yeah.
Yeah, but creates.
So would you say then that the people who are taking these sound bites of Christianity and weaponizing them, would you say that rather than try to pull them away from their narrative, you would try to push them deeper into their narrative then? Because I'm trying to figure out nonviolent mimetic ways of dealing with these people, because here's where I am, Barry. This is what's happened to me the past year. This is why I'm in Alaska, basically.
Yeah.
It's come down to fistfights that I have been engaged in the street with Christo-fascists who belligerently proclaim the police heroes who are regularly gunning down my comrades in the street, my unarmed Black comrades. And the past year, it has been literally, in order to defend my comrades, getting out on the line and just going toe to toe with the cops, taking a rubber bullet, getting thrown in the San Bernardino County Jail by cops who are just overtly racist and laugh in your face when they throw you in there. And my own parents vote for these kind of people. And it's become very personal for me because of that, because I love my parents. And I feel like they've been kidnapped by some psychopath who's feeding them this bullshit. And so here I am getting in literal fist fights with fascists, you know, and taking bullets from racist cops, or at least cops who are just neoliberal, pathetic people who don't care that we've already crossed the line to climate change irreversibility. My friends at JPL Antarctica Station, they crunched the numbers over and over and over, and they've shaken their heads about it. There's literally a 50% chance that the human race will go extinct within 100 years. And it's not just climate irreversibility and mass migrations. It's complete nobody left to read the books we spend our whole lives writing.
Yeah.
And knowing that the corporations that are destroying our planet, like behind the fascists, this is what I'm kind of figuring out the deeper I dig. The fascists they're just the frontline enemies. The people who are really the generals are these corporations who are raping and pillaging the earth and tricking these ignorant fascists to play football in high school and couldn't get past Algebra 1 into fighting all these people from the big city that are always making them feel inferior, and doing that, weaponizing their own inferiority and their own sense of cultural shame, especially in the South, where there's this whole strange, deeply psychoanalytic shame that's still related to the first Civil War, where the same goddamn thing happened. The rich plantation owners would talk their little cousins who lived in a shack somewhere off property into going and fighting for the glory of Dixie. And it's the same goddamn thing happen again. We're turning people like my family into cannon fodder for people like me who are punching them in the street. And I would like to figure out a nonviolent way to deal with this, because it's wearing me out.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the subject of complexity, I mean, I do think that the tragedy is that we have, I think, a couple of things really kind of messed up. A couple, but, you know, I mean, if you think about, so you think about the people who, you know, are against Black Lives Matter, or you know, they want to stop immigration, which, you know, is happening here in Britain as well. And, you know,
Yeah.
they've got a thing here.
What's going on here too?
Yeah, they want to, you know, you have these populist presidents or leaders of countries who appeal to the sort of basic instinct and to people's insecurity, and they create these myths of what the problem is, you know, rather than addressing the deep-seated anxiety that people are feeling about the loss of, you know, particular ways of life. I mean, the fact of the matter is, America, for instance, has been an immigrant society since its beginning, and the influx even of illegal immigrants is not a problem for the US to handle. It's just been weaponized or demonized and made to be the sort
Exactly.
of fall guy for deeper social problems, which is the world has changed quite dramatically. And Trump, you know, and then it's like, I'm going to bring back coal mining, you know, and it's like, well, no, you're not really. But you sold people all, you know, I'm going to bring back the steel belt, you know, we need American steel and all that kind of stuff. And people whose lives were built around those locations and those areas and those stories, their anxieties are addressed by creating these external forces that are to blame, which allows people then to continue doing the same thing. Because the problem in the US isn't just that US steel has been eclipsed by, you know, Chinese steel. It's because America has outsourced most of its production because we value corporate wealth over personal well-being. And
Yeah.
so, you know, you have and then you have the weird things like we love automation, but, you know, automation means less people. So, you know, in industries where it used to take, you know, 14 people to build a car, now it's 6 people and 3 robots, and soon it'll be 4 robots and 1 person just to make sure the robots are running, you know what I mean? And then you have 13 unemployed people. You know, multiply that over and over and over, and you can understand the anxiety. But instead of really sort of trying to address these social issues in radical ways that really address the base issues of what goes on, the world just revolves around this idea. You know, I mean, there's that classic line, I don't know who it came from, Zizek, Mark Fisher, you know, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism, you know. And
Yes.
we've convinced ourselves that there is no way to have democracy without capitalism. And it's not, and actually, I'm not as against the idea of capitalism as I am against the particular forms of
I
capitalism.
love you anyway, Barry.
No, well, I mean the particular forms of capitalism that we've fallen into, consumer capitalism, and, you know, the forms of industrial capitalism that allow for the growing disparity of wealth inequality around the world. You know what I mean? The erosion of, you know, the erosion of the middle class, which is really sort of non-existent in the West now. I mean, I know India's got an emerging middle class, but I think that's probably going to be a short-lived thing as well, you know, because the way the world is, the concentration of wealth is increasingly in a smaller and smaller and smaller number of people. And it seems that our governments just want to keep serving that rather than the well-being of the people. In the meantime, they keep people, I think, distracted by erroneous ideas, you know, like it's all problems with immigration, or it's all the EU's fault over here. You know, we blame the EU for everything, and quietly become more isolationist and nationalistic. And I realize, you know, there are problems.
Yeah, what's your take? What's your take on that issue as a Brit? I haven't talked. That's another thing I haven't talked to you since. The whole
It's
you guys had your own sort of Donald Trump, same haircut and all, right?
Yeah, we've still got one. And you know, I think it's the same story. People are buying into an idea. Now, I am pro-European, not because I think the EU is a fantastic entity. I think it's got some serious problems. And it's a bit like a lot of franchises. It expanded too quickly, too big for its own boots, and bureaucratically can't deal with what it needs to deal with. But the idea of a block of countries working together with a common economic and social goals, why would anybody argue with that? You know what I mean? That's got to be better than being by yourself.
Yeah.
This idea that you can float free and be independent in an interconnected, globally interconnected world like ours that depends on somewhere else for pretty much everything that we have. And while we might hope that we're all going to get back to a kind of more localized and sustainable way of living, that's not going to happen in a particular hurry, and that's going to take something that we're going to have to work towards. So why you want to disconnect from those, what I think is simply in many ways can be very positive lifelines, is just beyond me. So over here, you know, we've got this rising nationalism, you know, like what it means to be British. They've got a big thing about flags going on at the moment. British have never been flag wavers, and now they're like, the government wants government buildings to have a flag every single day. It's like, for God's sake.
You know, in the
current
current world, we consider flags to be magical sigils that program people.
Of course. Well, they do put that. I mean, they do, because they are symbolic of, you know, they're semiotic. I mean, they're science, and they create worlds, and they make huge ideological statements. And you know, they want to fly the flag government buildings every day now. You know, well, forgot. You know, what good does that do when you just lost 126,000 of your citizens to a virus because you wouldn't act in their best interests because it wasn't economically smart at the time? There's your problem.
Hey, how's the virus working in Britain? Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, if there's been a saving grace, it's been the vaccine, which seems to have both lowered. It's definitely lowered hospitalizations and deaths. It remains to be seen whether it's a long-term thing or a short-term thing. But you know, we're still in lockdown. This is our third lockdown. They're talking about things opening up in the next couple of months, but basically today is the 1-year anniversary of our first lockdown. And apart from about 6 weeks in the last year, we've been locked down ever since.
You guys don't have mobs of cowboys with guns demanding that they get a haircut?
No, I mean, there are in, you know, the world is very different. So there's a lot of, you know, there are more like anti-mask people, anti-vax people, anti-COVID people, you know, riding high on conspiracy theories, you know, worried about Bill Gates and the microchip, you know, whether having a vaccine.
I think, you know, they're actually enjoying that same community spirit we were talking about with the concerts and the churches. The QAnon, you know, they're having such a euphoric collective orgasm, or they were. Now they're in sort of the disappointment.
That's interesting, because that's the that's the emotional payoff of being part of something like that for those people, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you are familiar with the filmmaker Adam Curtis.
What has he made?
Right. He's Adam Curtis. He's a documentary filmmaker who works for the BBC. And
I might be.
He basically uses archive footage from the very extensive BBC archives to make these really interesting emotional documentaries, and he just a couple of weeks ago released an 8-hour 6-part series called Can't Get You Out of My Head, and it's about how we got here. And he called it an emotional journey to how we got here, and it's an exploration of all kinds of things, not the least of which, well, two of the major things are the way that a kind of isolationist nationalism began in Britain in the 1930s and has grown over the way. But the really
By Henry
interesting
VIII,
thing,
really.
yeah, but contemporary
Right.
sort of modern world isolationism. But the really interesting thing had to do with conspiracy theories. And do you know, are you aware of this thing called Operation Mindfuck?
Don't think so.
Well, Operation Mindfuck.
Is it related to QAnon?
Well, here's how it's related to QAnon. It was a couple of guys in the 1970s who wanted to see if they could create a conspiracy theory out of a story that they wrote for Playboy magazine on the Bavarian Illuminati.
Oh God.
And that is the seed of the QAnon conspiracy 50 years
Are you
later.
talking about Robert Anton Wilson?
Well, he wasn't the architect of that that thing, but it was another guy that but yeah, so they put this story in Playboy just to see what would happen with a fake story planted in a journal, and
Just to see if people actually read the articles.
just to see what would happen with a fake story, to see how people would respond to it. And of course, we know how people respond to those stories, and how increasingly through the age of technology, more and more people subscribe to these weird and wondrous theories that are detached from, larger realities, and live in these little worlds. So I mean, I think conspiracy theories are fascinating because they're very interesting how they work, and what they generate and what they don't. There's always part of the story that isn't it's like if they sort of, so in the current sort of QAnon thing, you've got this global cabal of left-wing Democrats and Hollywood celebrities who apparently run this child sex trafficking ring from a Pizza Hut in New Jersey or wherever it is. If they said it was a group of lizard people doing this, aliens from another planet, people wouldn't buy it, because there's an element of a conspiracy theory that has to be attached to a sort of seemingly logical, there has to be a seemingly logical component to it that allows people
I've heard screenwriters. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I've heard screenwriters refer to that as an important method.
Yeah, you have to have people have to be able to hang their anxiety on, and I think that's what it is. I think conspiracy theories are at their heart mechanisms for people's fears and anxieties that allow them to act out what they can't address, maybe because they can't get therapy, or maybe because they're not helping.
I think that my dad was a bit of, so my dad was an author, among other things, for the Louisiana Mound Society newsletter, which was a little bit of a fringe, it was a newsletter that wasn't shiny or stapled. I mean, you know what I mean? It was just paper that you'd get in the mail. And it was like, so I mean, I think back then in the 80s and 90s, these conspiracy people were, I mean, for one thing, not to generalize, but I mean, I don't know if my dad, I know he had dyslexia and he was extremely intelligent. His mother had borderline schizophrenia. So, and my dad was very psychic and into all these things and astral things. And so from a medical purely scientific rational point of view, he might have had a touch of the schizophrenia as well. And so he gravitated toward the conspiracy theories. But then with the advent of the internet, these guys had this, I hate to keep using the word orgasm, but they found thousands of other people that were just like themselves in the AOL Instant Messenger chat rooms in 1995. And ever since then, it's just been a party, and it just keeps growing and becoming a giant rave around the world.
Yeah, I mean,
Barry, do you care? I mean, Edward, do you care to tell Edward about? Edward, do you care to tell Barry about any of your experiences with the early Anon community?
With the early, no, I mean, I only interviewed the one guy.
Okay.
It's episode something rather in the 40s, Jonathan Sims. He was an Uber passenger, so it was really just a coincidence, and everything I know about him was in the interview.
Wow, I'll check it out.
Yeah, he was one of the instrumental guys in the beginning when they were going up against Scientology. And among other things, he created their aesthetic of like the Max Headroom with the Guy Fawkes mask, kind of thing. And some of the early videos were his. And they were anonymous at the time, but then they became the inspiration for that show, Mr. Robot. They had like a similar thing. And then so after 5 or 6 years, he was able to come out, because the Church of Scientology actually weakened as a result of the work they did, and stopped being so threatening. And so he was actually able to come out and admit that he was the one doing it. And he talked all about it on the podcast. And he didn't say everything he did, but he said some of the conversations that he had, because what was interesting to him when he was my Uber passenger, because we just started talking, what do you do? Oh, this and that, yoga, podcast. Oh, what do you know? And then before you know it, I don't know, what was I talking about? So
anyway, just so,
are you stoned this morning as well?
Yeah, I'm a little bit high. Actually, it's nighttime for me.
Oh yes.
Just so we know,
Barry, what are you on right now? Are you sharing the experience?
No, because I got some work to do, so I actually need to go in 10 minutes, just to let you know.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
what should we wrap up with, Robby?
This is my dying question. How do we use what we know about linguistics and memetics to create a disinformation campaign to try to convert folks instead of having to fight them off?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. Have you ever read that Richard Rorty book? What's it called? Solidarity. Anyway, there's a Richard Rorty, the philosopher, talks a lot about the whole world of language, and how, firstly, that there are always periods in time when the way we talk is eclipsed by another way of speaking, so the sort of mechanical age gets eclipsed by, or the medieval world gets eclipsed by the mechanical world, and we get a whole new kind of way of thinking about the nature of reality. And he also goes on to talk about the ways in which he talks about the role of poets in creating new ways of speaking about things. I think one of the challenges to me is that I don't think you can argue with people who don't want to. I don't think you can converse with people. I'll say that. I don't think you can converse with people who don't want to hear what you have to say. And one of the challenges with dogmatic people, whether it's, fundamentalist Christians or fundamentalist anything, fundamentalist vegans, you know what I mean, or fundamentalist meat eaters, they don't want to hear. They just want to shout you down or whatever. And it's very easy to get caught up in an endless and repetitive back and forth of arguing positions. And I think the challenge is we have to find new ways of speaking about both old ideas and new possibilities. And I think the great challenge is to find new pathways for conversing about things. Because Rorty's point is that when you don't answer the old questions, or you don't respond with the old answers, you disempower the conversation, because people don't know how to respond when you don't say what they expect you to say. So when you don't come back with, what they would say would be, a left-wing liberal response to their right-wing screed, or vice versa, but you actually you offer a different pathway. It creates this. You end that old conversation. It just can't go on. Right. And I think a lot of people, that they somehow think they can convince someone. There's very little possibility of convincing someone who trades in either extreme dogma or conspiracy theory about an alternative reality. It's just not conceptually possible for them. But maybe.
So what's the alternative of fighting those people in the street then? Well,
I don't know. I mean, I also wouldn't. I don't think. I also do think that this is a time for action, and I don't think we can afford to be passive. But I'm not so sure that fighting in the streets is going to get us there anyway.
I have an idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that sports like football and any old sport, cricket, it's kind of like, when India goes up against Pakistan, or England for that matter, people are cheering, and there's something underneath that beyond just watching a bunch of sweaty guys play a game. And I think that it replaces war in a way. It replaces the mass tribal instinct toward war. And so I think that we need to create some sports teams of political, like fascists versus, Antifa, or, get the, I think it was the ancient Greek idea.
Here's the one thing I can say really quickly, Rob, is I don't think that sloganeering is going to solve anything. And I think, again, it's complex. There aren't any easy answers, and I do think that protest needs to be made. Whether it's fighting in the street is the answer, I don't know, but maybe forming protective cordons and barriers around people and taking the hits. I don't know, but
yeah. That's how it starts. The Black Bloc anarchists, we're not, and I say we because I own that label.
Sure.
Just so if people want to look me up, and I'm willing to go, but my fascist stalkers. But that's what we started. We didn't start out as a group that wanted to fight people. We started out as a group.
I get that.
And we wore black so people would know who we were.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I also know you. I know that you're not just looking for a fight to have a fight. That really the opposite is true. I just think that we can only work in the ways. I do think we have to sort of work locally as well. There is no big picture resolve to this at the moment, because there are so many moving parts that have to come into place. We have to take it. I hate to say it, but I really think we have to take it sort of one step at a time, one issue, one moment at a time, and see what we can do in that particular moment that fosters.
I have a perfect example that we can end on. A concrete, tangible example. One thing I've learned about here in Alaska is that they have socialized resources. Yeah. For every log and drop of oil that is sold, everybody in Alaska gets a check. But these are the same people who think that socialists are demons and demon-possessed hippies. but they're doing socialism with their resources.
Yep.
And I think if we can extract the issues from the labels and just talk about it in purely pragmatic, almost numerical terms, I think that might be a starting point for just making it sane.
To be honest, that's Rorty's point. But if you go, oh well, that's socialism, you've already lit a fire. You don't have to say it's socialism. You can know it's socialism. Right. You can just go, yeah, that's a good way to live. We should do more of that.
Ooh, nice.
Anyway, I hate to cut everybody off because it's
it's been delightful.
No, that's a good end.
Anyway, great to talk.
Barry, I wish I could give you a big hug. You get.
Thanks for having me. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very nice meeting you.
All right, love you, brother.
I love you too, mate. Bye.
Bye.
I love it. I'm enamored of his particular brand of English accent. I mean, you can tell he spent decades around British rockers,
That's true. Yeah, because there's generational accents. Like if you look at old movies from black and white New York, there's like, yeah, see, like, did people actually talk like that?
Yeah.
Is it just for TV?
Did he tell? Before I got on the horn with you, did he tell you about his days with ACDC?
A little bit, yeah. We just sort of covered it, briefly. He talked about how it was a different world, different time, But then there was some overlap between that and being a rector. And then I was geeking out about how the Dionysian ecclesia, the early community, the ritual community evolved into both ACDC and the church. But he didn't seem to. I don't know if he was very impressed.
I can't wait to hear that. That sounds like brilliant stuff.
Well, I think at that point we were trying to get you on there, and so I don't know what was.
Oh, man.
I'll have to listen to it to see how it went.
That's a trip that we were working on such disparate. So it's tomorrow there compared to me, and I'm yesterday to you.
Yeah,
is
midnight.
Barry yesterday to me, or is he somewhere at the other end of the day?
Right now, for me, it's midnight on the 24th. For him, it's the 23rd at around 6 p.m. And for you, it's what, 11 a.m.? 11, something like that?
Yeah, it's 10:42.
Yeah. So we're covering half the world. We made a triangle. It's sort of not a equilateral triangle. I don't know if it's a right triangle, but something like that. Not exactly 90 degrees, I'm sure.
It is kind of cool that I can dive headfirst into a Jack London wilderness experience up here and still get to talk to my friends on the different corners of the globe.
Yeah.
Before it would have been like, I'll talk to you in a year. When I get back, we'll send a message by barge.
Here, let's do an experiment here. I'm going to flip on my video. Are you there?
Okay. Yay!
This will be on the YouTube.
You delightful bastard.
This is going to go on YouTube.
Let me see if I can flip mine on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This will be on the YouTube version of the episode. I think it's recording.
So I hope I retain signal. There's some of the misty mountains behind me, and it's amazing.
Wow.
Like a lot of the cool pictures I took were within 2 miles of this property, because up there it can be completely snowing and look like a snowman movie. And then down in the valley where the peat bogs are, it's just like this dank rainforest with these exotic alien like mushrooms.
Sounds like you're on mushrooms.
The most beautiful biome I've ever experienced.
The connection was weird. So when you were talking about mushrooms, you were saying
I am Ashish, which is just a level below.
Okay.
That does sound good. I wish I had some mushrooms up here, because these little fairy trails that go down through the ravine, the entire forest floor is coated with like 12 inches of thick microferns,
Mm.
and every little bump and mound and tree stuff is just completely carpeted. So you can literally take off your shoes and run across it, giggling like a toddler. It is an amazing place, and I wish I had so much room to do that.
Wow, how fun.
But hashish was pretty good to have.
Hmm. That's good.
Good CP grade hashish. Ah.
So
Hey, who's the god?
Hmm?
Who's the god or goddess of the fire? The
Well,
heart.
there's Agni. Agni in the Rig Veda, the very beginning of the Rig Veda, the very oldest of the Vedas. The first thing it says is, "Oh Agni, you know, you are the fire." I don't have it memorized, but it's like, you know, this beautiful poetry about, you know, you heat our food and shit, and you are the energy in our blood too. Like
Yeah.
it's like this very primal, like, whoa, wow. And there's actually something they say. Oh gosh,
Can you
there's something they say.
read it?
What?
I want to hear that.
Oh, I can't hear what you're saying. Maybe we should go back to audio.
Oh no. Let's see.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe
There we go.
Uses too much bandwidth to do the video.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
what were you saying? The Agni? I think I've got that right. I hope I do.
Oh. If you have it handy, I would love to hear the whole thing.
Sure, one moment.
I tell you though, this rarefied air up here is it's like a drug in its own right. Standing up on the rim of this mountain and breathing in this fog coming off of the bay and mixing with the pine and the moss and the peat. It's the I've been doing a lot of four-sided breathing up on the rim of that hill, and that's been completely euphoric in its own right.
Nice. Okay, you ready for Agni? Agni.
Let's hear more of Agni.
All right. Oh, I thought that was the beginning of it, and it tricked me. It tricked me. It's like, okay, get to it. Why are you like this? Okay, here we go. Here we go. We're almost there. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
The suspense is killing me.
Okay, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. I glorify Agni, the high priest of the sacrifice, the divine, the ministrant, who presents the oblation to the gods and is the possessor of great wealth. May that Agni, who is to be celebrated by both ancient and modern sages, conduct the gods hither. So I love when they're talking about ancient. This is 5,000 years ago. They're talking about ancient, you know.
5,000?
Isn't it the Rig Veda? It's pretty old. Maybe 3,000?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Rig Veda's I think it's pushing up there. Like some people say the original stories in terms of imagery can be traced back to at least 10.
It's just interesting
just
when they talk about
archaeologically,
ancient times, like what are they talking about? You know what I mean? Like
yeah, that's it, I think.
And then okay,
go ahead
so
though.
through Agni, the worshiper obtains that influence which increases day by day, which is the source of fame and the multiplier of mankind. Agni, the unobstructed sacrifice of which you are on every side the protector, assuredly reaches the gods. May Agni, the presenter of oblations, the attainer of knowledge, he who is true, renowned, and divine, come hither with the gods. Whatever good you may, Agni, bestow upon the giver of the oblation, that verily Angiras shall revert to you. We approach you, Agni, with reverential homage in our thoughts daily, both morning and evening. You, the radiant, the protector of sacrifices, the constant illuminator of truth, increasing in your own dwelling. Agni, be to us easy of excess, as is a father to his son. Be ever present with us for our good.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that being more fiery. but apparently Agni is god of fire. So that's the very beginning of the first of the Vedas, the oldest of the Vedas.
Well, that was beautiful, though.
Yeah, it
that
is
felt like
nice.
a name. That felt almost like a name endpoint.
His
Like
wife is.
crazy.
I wish I could remember. I only remember it in the Japanese. You know how they pieced together the Japanese alphabet back in the 800s based on Sanskrit in Nara?
What?
No,
I didn't know
yeah. It was a wild time. There was this an emperor that there was if I recall correctly, that you know how it is with YouTube, you don't retain it, you only retain half of it. There was an emperor, and the people were like, I don't know about this emperor, you know, I don't think that the Buddhist god likes this emperor or whatever. You know how people were back in the 800s. And so they found an Indian guy,
Of course.
who was like a scholar, who was like a Buddhist scholar. And they were like, dude, you are Indian and you're Buddhist, you're coming with us and you're meeting the emperor because you're going to be our saint. You know, it's sort of like the Theosophical Society did with Ramakrishna. And so he came.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Oh God, I wish I knew. I have it written down somewhere, I think. And so he is Bodhi something, but not the other. There's Bodhidharma, it's not him. It's anyway.
Yeah, there's a few.
Bodhi Sawaka. Sawaka, whatever that is. They say Sawaka, but in the original Sanskrit, it's like a giving respect to the wife of Agni. And but it's come to mean like amen. It's like their version of amen in Hindi. I mean, in Hindu, they say, you know, for Agni's wife, you know, like at the end of everything. I don't know. I'm going to sound like an ignoramus to anybody who actually knows what I'm talking about.
So
that
you're
sounded
basically
like an
thanking
arrogant
the mother
way
of all.
to be humble. I'm like, for the people who actually know what I'm talking about, I'm going to sound like an ignoramus. But being arrogant and humble at the same
You
time.
wear them both well. You wear them both well, my brother.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
So it's basically saying thank you to the mother of all, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Because if it's the wife, if it's the wife of God, it's the mother of us.
Well, I've got to work out how it's all connected. I don't think they have such a. Agni's not the one god that connects all gods. I don't think. There's certain philosophies. There's 6 orthodox philosophies, and there's 6 unorthodox philosophies, and of course, I'm sure there's more than 6 unorthodox philosophies in India. One of the 6 is the idea that I think everybody who's listened to a lot of Alan Watts assumes that is what everybody in India thinks, which is the whole everything is one and it's non-dual, or everything is non-dual and
Right.
we're the gods and Shiva is me and I'm Shiva and everything, you know. And that's been I don't mean to belittle it. That's a very beautiful point of view, and Sri Ramakrishna and a few others have kind of emphasized that. And then of course in the West, you know, they love it. The New Age Westerner loves that point of view. But of course there's a lot of other, you know, sort of more conservative, more traditional, more, you know, like with Christianity, there's like different, there's the Episcopal and there's the traditional Catholic and the traditional Greek Orthodox and, you know, whatever. Same with Judaism, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of shades of Hindu just like that, I think, from what I've observed.
Yeah, I guess being on the ground, I guess you've seen those different kind of manifestations or different denominations or whatever.
Well, yeah, like when you have Hindus defending Muslims from other Hindus, it's interesting. Like it's more complicated than people in the West kind of, you know, it's sort of cartoonish, Hindu versus Muslim, and it's like, no, there's some Hindus that hate the Muslims, and then the Hindus that hate the Hindus who hate the Muslims, or, you know, the Hindus who are think of India as a secular, diverse country, you know, like, or a country that embraces diversity both historically and in the present, which is, you know, how it got so diverse to begin with. you know, that moving forward, maybe we shouldn't be like murdering Muslims, you know, like what a concept. And then there's the ones that think, oh, well, Gandhi let too many Muslims stay here. He should have kicked them all out or whatever. And, you know, and it's weird to like meet them and find out that they're your yoga instructor, you know? I mean, it's like, it's like, I guess it's just
Oh,
as uncomfortable. It'd
huh.
be like the equivalent of going to a yoga class in the West and finding out that they're a Trump supporter. I mean, but here it's actually normal. I mean, here
It's kind of like me coming up to Alaska and finding out that my host mom is like basically the head of the Sarah Palin fan club, and going out to Joshua Tree to this awesome
well, it's
coffee,
Alaska.
and only
Celebrities
after
are
being there, you're
celebrities.
finding out that the main guy voted for him, you know. And,
Yeah.
in a weird way, nature
Weird.
seems to be a good place to bring people together, because who doesn't like nature, you know?
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's the way that the whole discourse is packaged, like environmentalist liberals versus plucky, hardworking capitalists, maybe. That
Yeah,
just,
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because I can kind of see it from
That's why I
there.
wanted
I'm
to
sure
talk
you
to Barry.
can.
Yeah, I've been obsessing on this question, having been a grad student,
Which
basically, of
question?
analytic philosophy. How to alter the discourse, or how to create the most nonviolent possible discourse between these groups. You know, that's been my kind of burning question.
Gosh.
But I think, like Barry said, we'll kind of come to pragmatic solutions one at a time, probably. Just like the socialism question up here, where everybody hates socialism, but everybody gets a government check for their socialized resources.
You know, it's weird.
It's just like pass the legislation without labeling it.
Like the core of the you know, the Trump people were, they were really in a cult mentality where the you know, the people who got Biden in were just like happened to outnumber them, you know, but they weren't like Biden. There's not a Biden cult, you know, like it's just, you know, okay, let's bring back the Republic. But then so it's there, it's like the Republic versus Caesar or something, like you know, I mean, that back and forth. At least it seems that way to me, because like if the people on the right criticize Biden and criticize, you know, of course, yeah, no, he is a shit. Of course, he's a politician. Of course, he's bombing Syria. You know, like I don't defend bombing Syria, of course, but I'm happy that it's not President Trump. You know, but I don't know if maybe he bombed Syria fewer times, or I don't know. You know, it seemed to me that he wasn't bombing a lot at first, but then he did a little bit later on. But
yeah, what is it about presidents that makes them turn so bomby?
They change as soon as they become president. I think Biden didn't have to change as much because he already kind of knew, he had seen behind the curtain already. But definitely when Obama, he changed from his inauguration to like a few days later. His whole set of priorities and his whole concept of how the world works, I think, changed. But they don't tell you. It's weird. They let people run for president not knowing these big secrets, and then once they're president, then they find out, you know, about the aliens and about whatever the hell else they find out. I don't even know. It's interesting that some of those interviews with Bill Clinton on like Arsenio Hall or whatever, like where he kind of confronts him about Area 51, and it's kind of like, what? Why won't he? He's, you know, avoiding the question with a joke every time. It's just like, okay, he's just going to do that, or is he really hiding something? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting stuff.
It has been interesting to see commentators actually asking the hard questions and calling certain people to tasks on the facts on air. And it's so sad to see how quickly those same people hang up once they're actually shown facts. In the same way that if you actually try to talk to somebody at a Trump rally, they'll just all start chanting USA, USA instead of,
yeah, because it's tribal. It's not actually it's not a conversation. It's not a debate, really. It's just yeah, like a shouting match, or some kind
Gosh,
of really old
this is a
mammalian tribal thing. I don't know.
all right, brother. Well, I've gotta go and do a little projects here, and the lady's gonna need the cabin here pretty soon.
All right. Well, it's good hearing
virtu-
from you.
Virtual hugs to you.
Yeah, and that was fun. Thanks for bringing him on.
All right, much love, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, you too. Well, thank you very much, Barry Taylor, for sharing this. It was a good conversation. I hope we do a repeat of this, a part 2. We can all kind of mull over some of the ideas, and we'll see about that later on. So thank you as always. I mean, when you are the co-host, Robby, for being my co-host tonight. And thank you to Susumu Ueda, as well as his father and the other monks at Jofuku-in Temple on Mount Koyasan for the music you're hearing right now. Thank you to Camille and Kennerly for the harp introduction and outro, the intro and outro to the episode. And special thanks to you, the Esoterinerd, listening to this podcast. Go forth in love, truth, and knowledge with the blessings of Yeshua Yavasho. Until we meet again. Good night. Oh, it's working. Hi. So this part is just for the YouTube. Bleh. Hi. This part is just for the people tuning in on the YouTube channel. I want to apologize if anybody's noticed that there are episodes on the YouTube channel that cut off, the audio cuts off after halfway. That is a very unfortunate thing. It was happening because of the silly app that I was using on my phone to do this. Like I said, I've got Final Cut now, so you might have noticed this video is a little bit better quality than the usual ones. I was using the free app on the Android phone. Anyway, I wanted to thank you for watching this all the way through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're confused, this is me in March. I think it's March 23rd or 24th, is it? Yeah, it's March 24th here in India. And the previous episode that was uploaded to YouTube was 5 years ago in California, in kind of a whole different life. So I'm currently uploading the old episodes up to YouTube with the intent to eventually get caught up to present time. But I decided not to wait until then to start uploading the new episodes, especially since I have this nifty video software. So that's what's happening. And the videos in the videos section of the YouTube, the Esoterinerd YouTube, are probably going to be a little out of order going forward, because I'm going to have to fix some of the old episodes, like random episodes like 12 and 20 whatever, that weren't complete. And so you're going to see those appear from time to time out of order if you're subscribed to Esoterinerd. But occasionally you'll get an episode like this one, which is new, brand new, hot off the presses, present time. And so welcome, and thank you again for sitting all the way through to the end. If you did indeed sit all the way through to the end, and you haven't yet, I would beseech thee to subscribe. Is it here? Subscribe? And I won't go so far as to ask you to click the notification bell. If you could like the video, it'd be very nice. I won't go so far as to ask you to comment, but all of those things help. As you might notice, this channel currently has, 50 subscribers? And if you are one of the 50, you're one of the ones that were there before I sold out, back when it was cool, to be a fan of this YouTube page. But if you don't mind, just taking a moment, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you want to help me out, I don't have a Patreon page. I'm not trying to make money off this thing, but I think it'd be nice to trick the algorithm into recommending my channel and this content that people discuss on my channel to more people. Just get more eyeballs, or in this case, eardrums. And going forward, maybe a little bit more of the eyeballs. This episode was kind of a new thing. You got to see people's faces a little bit here and there. Okay, thank you again for tuning in. I think that covered everything. Oh, also, I'm gonna see if I can get it to appear here at some point. But maybe it's there, maybe it's not. But I have another channel. It's called Edward Reeb, EDW8RD space REIB. So here on this channel, I'm very honored, Frater BT. On that channel, I go by my earthly or mundane name, Edward Reeb, and I'm currently doing a series there about my travels in 2017 and 2018, which eventually led me here to my new life in India. So do please tune in and check those out. They're kind of slow-moving, artsy, not a whole lot of action, but if you kind of want to ride along and see what it was like going on that journey, and please like and subscribe and so on and so forth on that channel as well, if you're feeling generous. Okay, that's enough out of me. Namaste and LVX.